All right, so we're going deep today, folks, into some pretty fascinating stuff, I think, about spirituality and how it connects to human evolution. And we're going to be looking through the lens of the philosopher Martinus. We've got a bunch of articles and notes based on his work. And what we really want to unpack today are some of his most powerful insights about, how we humans relate to the whole idea of God.
Yeah, it's a big one, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking the whole spectrum here, like from the super primal, instinct for faith that our earliest ancestors had to, the intellectual back and forth, the struggle with belief that I think so many of us experience these days.
Yeah, and Martinus, what's really striking about him is he kind of turns the whole this trend towards godlessness on its head. Like, instead of looking at it as this spiritual dead end, he often frames it as this absolutely essential stage of development.
I like that.
Yeah, it's like we've climbed out of this cozy cradle of just blind faith, and now we're in this exhilarating but maybe kind of terrifying free fall before we can figure out how to fly on our own.
It's like that whole crisis of faith thing, right?
Totally.
Where the old stories don't quite do it for you anymore, but you haven't found that new map to navigate all the big existential questions.
Exactly. And that's where Martinus comes in with this, I think, really amazing lifeline. He's basically saying that even the most simple instinct, like a sunflower tilting towards the sun, that's the very foundation of higher consciousness. And yes, even spirituality. Which means if you think about those early humans, right, they weren't reading scriptures or debating theology. Their faith, it was this gut level knowing. It was as fundamental as breathing, as being in sync with everything around them.
So it's almost like spirituality is less of a human invention and more like we're tapping into something that's already woven into the fabric of existence itself.
That's the beauty of it, right? I mean, that's the beauty of how Martinus thinks. He sees the divine in literally everything, in every day, the instinctual, think about those early humans, the source material, it mentions them picturing gods hurling thunderbolts or spirits, living in these sacred groves.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And to us, it might seem kind of simplistic, maybe even superstitious, but it was their way of making sense of all this stuff they couldn't explain. It was their first attempt to wrap their heads around something so much bigger than themselves.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But then, okay, so if this instinct for the divine is so fundamental, why does it feel like we've kind of lost touch with it,
Right.
Especially now with all our scientific advances and intellectual progress. I mean, did we just kind of trade faith for facts somewhere along the way?
It's a huge question, right? It's something Martinus really wrestled with too. He observed that as we got smarter, as humanity's intellect got sharper, our ability to dissect the material world, that flourished. But we started losing that direct connection to the abstract, to the spiritual. It's our left brain obsessed with analyzing and categorizing. It just totally overshadowed the wisdom of our right brain, that part that feels, that intuits.
It makes you wonder though, does that mean we're doomed to be spiritually malnourished in this day and age?
Yeah.
Or is there a way to, reconcile this instinct with all of our intellectual advancements? Could they actually help each other somehow?
And that's where things get really, really interesting. Because Martinus, he introduces this whole idea of humanity actually being made up of two basic mentalities. He calls them the sheep. Those are the folks driven by compassion, and the goats, who are all about power and usually driven by conflict. And he's very clear that nobody's purely one or the other. Right. It's more we've all got this, inner tug of war happening.
So is it kind of two sides of the same coin, this sheep and goat thing? Are they both essential, or is it the conflict between them that's holding us back?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And this inner duality thing, it's not just a personal struggle. Martinus is suggesting it plays out on a global scale too. Huh. We see it in our relationships, our political systems, our whole approach to the environment. It's this constant tension between the folks seeking harmony and those who just keep the conflict going.
Which brings us to something that honestly sounds a little ominous. Martinus's devil consciousness. So are we talking about a literal devil here?
Not quite, no. Think of it less some guy with horns and a pitchfork, and more a way of being, a kind of consciousness that's so disconnected from our true compassionate selves that it can do unimaginable harm. Mm-hmm. It's the mentality that lets us justify actions that cause massive suffering, often because we believe we're serving some higher purpose.
So like a kind of spiritual blindness that leads to truly terrible things. Are there any like real world examples of this devil consciousness in action?
Oh, unfortunately, it's not hard to find examples. The whole development and use of the atomic bomb, for instance. To even rationalize that kind of destruction, you need a level of detachment from basic human empathy that Martinus would absolutely categorize as devil consciousness.
That's a pretty sobering thought.
Yeah.
If this devil consciousness can do that kind of damage, is there any hope for us? Can we actually evolve beyond this destructive part of ourselves, like both individually and as a whole society?
Well, that's why you see Martinus's optimism really come through. I mean, he truly believed that as a species, we are on this journey, this evolutionary journey towards a much more compassionate way of being. Like, we're slowly but surely shedding this devil consciousness for something way, way better. And, here's the amazing part. Every act of kindness, every time we choose understanding over conflict, we're chipping away at that destructive force.
That's really encouraging, actually. It makes you think that even just little acts of compassion can have this ripple effect. Like they contribute to this huge shift in consciousness, right?
Exactly.
It's almost like, an antidote to all the despair you can feel when you see so much suffering in the world.
Absolutely. And, this kind of leads us to what Martinus considered humanity's ultimate destiny, which is achieving this state of oneness with God through love and intuition.
Okay.
Like he envisioned this future where we totally transcend suffering and finally wake up to our true nature, which, he believed is inherently divine.
So it's not about like blind faith or, following strict rituals, but more about tapping into like a direct experience of something bigger than ourselves, like a kind of knowing that's beyond what we currently understand.
You got it. It's like reconnecting with that deep well of instinct and intuition that Martinus always said is there, always guiding us towards this like unity and wholeness. He believed that we're all on this journey of evolving consciousness, whether we know it or not. And this is where it gets really interesting because he suggests that this unity, it's not some far off utopia. It's something we can actually catch glimpses of like right now.
You mean like those moments of really deep connection you feel sometimes, like when you're overwhelmed with love for someone, or you have this like sudden insight that totally shifts your perspective?
Exactly. Those, Martinus would say, are flashes of our true nature. Those moments when we're tapping into that unity consciousness we're all evolving towards. And the more we cultivate those experiences, the stronger that connection gets. And, the closer we get to reaching our full spiritual potential.
It makes me wonder, though, if it's this like evolutionary process. Do we actually have any control over it? Or are we just along for the ride? Can we actually do anything to like speed things up to bring about this unity consciousness faster?
Well, Martinus was very, very clear that we are not just passive passengers in this whole thing. He really believed that every single choice we make, every action we take, it's either feeding that devil consciousness or it's nourishing that sheep mentality, It's like we're constantly at this crossroads having to choose between fear and love, separation and unity.
So it's not just about like meditating on a mountaintop or having these big mystical experiences. It's about how we show up in our everyday lives and the way we treat other people, the choices we make.
100%. Martinus really believed that the truest expression of spirituality, it's not about these grand gestures. It's about the little things, how we treat each other, how we face challenges, how we contribute to the world around us. It's about embodying compassion, forgiveness, and understanding in absolutely every part of our lives.
It sounds like a huge responsibility, though, right? To think that our choices, like individually, can have that much impact on the world. It's almost, I don't know, it's kind of intimidating.
Martinus wouldn't shy away from that at all. He really believed that taking responsibility for our own spiritual evolution is like crucial. We're not victims of circumstance. We're active creators of our own reality.
Oh, we're not just like at the mercy of fate or some random cosmic lottery.
Nope.
We actually have a say in how our lives play out and how that impacts the world around us.
That's the truly empowering message at the heart of his whole philosophy. It's this idea that we're always attracting certain experiences to us based on our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. And the more we align ourselves with that, sheep mentality, the more we invite experiences that reflect those values.
Okay, let's get real for a second. Like, say someone's listening to this, right? And they're feeling super inspired to embody these ideas, to really step into this more conscious way of being. where do they even start?
That is a fantastic question, and thankfully Martinus gives us some pretty practical advice. He emphasizes the importance of self-knowledge, of understanding our own patterns of thinking and behaving. He encourages us to really examine our motivations, to question our assumptions, to become aware of all those subtle ways we might be, like unknowingly perpetuating that devil consciousness.
So it's like doing a deep dive into our own minds, like a personal inventory of where we're getting stuck in those fear-based patterns.
Precisely. It's about becoming really conscious of our biases, our fears, all those limiting beliefs that hold us back. And once we see them, once we've identified them, we can start to challenge them. We can choose different thoughts, different actions that are more aligned with love, compassion, and unity.
Sounds like a lifelong process though, right? I mean, you could just like flip a switch and suddenly be these totally enlightened beings.
You're absolutely right. It's a journey, not a destination. And Martinus always said it's a journey that takes patience, persistence, and, a willingness to learn from our mistakes.
So it's less about perfection and more about progress. Like just constantly trying to be a little better, a little kinder, a little more aware each day.
You got it. Martinus would say it's the effort that counts. It's the intention to move towards the light, even if we trip up along the way. And every step we take in that direction, it matters, not just for us, but for everyone around us.
It's actually really encouraging, especially in a world that can feel so chaotic and overwhelming sometimes. It's nice to know that even our smallest acts of kindness, those tiny efforts to be more loving and understanding, they're actually part of something so much bigger.
And here's another really thought-provoking idea from Martinus. He believed that as we evolve individually, we're actually contributing to the collective evolution of all humanity, He saw it like we're all interconnected, and the progress we make, it ripples outward and influences the consciousness of the whole planet.
Wow, so it's not just about, our own personal enlightenment, but about helping to raise the consciousness of everyone. That's a much bigger, more expansive view of spiritual growth than you usually hear about.
It is. Martinus believed that we're all in this together, that our individual journeys are all woven together, and the more we wake up to our true nature, the more we contribute to creating a world where, love, peace, and understanding finally win.
This has been such a fascinating conversation about Martinus and his ideas, but there's one question that's kind of been nagging at me this whole time.
I think I know what you're going to ask. Go ahead.
Okay, so if we're all inherently divine, if we're all on this path towards unity consciousness, why is there still so much suffering in the world? Why all the hatred, the violence, the injustice? If we're really all connected, shouldn't there be a lot more harmony and peace?
Yeah, that's the big paradox, right? And, Martinus, he doesn't shy away from it at all. He acknowledges that there's a ton of suffering in the world. It's this apparent contradiction, right? Between this idea of our, supposedly divine nature and all the darkness we see going on around us.
So he's not offering some kind of rose-colored glasses, everything happens for a reason kind of spirituality.
Nope, not at all. What Martinus offers is, challenging, but ultimately, I think, really hopeful. Yeah. He says that suffering, it's painful, obviously, but it's not some kind of cosmic punishment. He sees it as a key part of our evolution, this catalyst for growth that pushes us to, confront our limits and wake up to who we really are.
It's kind of like those times in our lives when we hit rock bottom, when we experience some huge loss or heartbreak. It's often those moments that make us question everything and force us to look for a deeper meaning.
Exactly. Those are the times when we're most ready for change, when we're most open to expanding our consciousness. Martinus would say that suffering, it has this unique ability to break down our old rigid ways of thinking. It forces us to see that we're all connected, that we're not these isolated individuals, but part of something much, much bigger.
But if that's true, why does it seem like some people get stuck in these cycles of suffering? They never quite reach that transformation point. Are some of us just, destined to struggle, while others seem to find meaning in their pain?
Well, that's where the whole idea of free will comes into play. Martinus, he was a huge believer in our ability to choose how we respond to suffering. He saw it like a fork in the road. We can let it make us bitter and resentful, or we can use it as fuel to grow. Cultivate more compassion and understanding to connect more deeply with ourselves and others.
So it's not about pretending the pain isn't there, right?
Yeah.
It's about finding a way to turn it into something positive, something that ultimately helps us evolve and maybe even helps other people along the way.
Yeah, that's the alchemy, right? Martinus believed that it's precisely in those dark moments when we're facing our deepest fears that we have the biggest opportunity to awaken to who we really are. He even used the metaphor of a diamond, how it's formed under intense pressure. It's through those trials that we discover our strength and brilliance.
That's a really powerful image. But it still feels kind of unfair, doesn't it? Why do some people have to go through so much more than others? It's hard to square that with the idea of, a loving and benevolent universe.
It's the question, right? It's the question that's haunted us forever. And Martinus, he doesn't pretend to have all the answers. He acknowledges the mystery, the seeming randomness of it all. But he also suggests that maybe, from a cosmic perspective, there's this big plan unfolding, something we can't grasp with our limited human understanding.
So it's about trusting that there's this bigger picture, even when we can't see it. Like trusting that even in the midst of all the bad stuff, there's this purpose, this evolution that we're all part of.
That's the leap of faith, right? It's trusting the process, which is what Martinus always encouraged. He wanted us to focus on our own growth, on becoming the best versions of ourselves, and to trust that by doing that, we're helping to raise the consciousness of everyone.
It's funny, even after all the heavy topics we've talked about today, I'm actually feeling pretty optimistic. It's like knowing that even though suffering's a part of life, there's also this huge potential for growth, for transformation, for unity. And it's pretty beautiful when you think about it.
I think that's the power of Martinus, right? He doesn't try to hide the darkness, but he always points us toward the light. He reminds us that we're not just victims, we're active participants in our own evolution. And every choice we make, it matters, it can tip the scales.
This has been such an interesting deep dive. We've covered so much. Instinct, intellect, the sheep and goats, devil consciousness, and this ultimate vision of oneness with God. We've only just scratched the surface of Martinus's work, but I feel like we've uncovered some really valuable insights along the way.
And that's the best part about Martinus, I think. He invites us to keep asking questions, to keep exploring, to find our own path to that unity consciousness. It's not about, blindly accepting everything he said, but about using his ideas as a starting point for our own spiritual journeys.
And I think that's a great message for everyone listening. Whether Martinus's ideas resonate with you or not, the important thing is to keep searching, keep growing, keep trying to be the best you can be. Because when you do that, you're not just evolving yourself, you're helping to create a more compassionate and connected world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to everyone out there, keep questioning, keep growing, keep shining your light. The journey's just getting started.
And remember, even in those really dark times, there's always a light inside you, just waiting to be discovered. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep seeking and keep evolving.